All
All
right, should be going live.
Don't know.
Thank you for bearing with folks as we're sure we have our technology working.
There it goes.
Okay, excellent. All right, should be going live.
Don't know.
Thank you for bearing with folks as we're okay. And it looks like there might be a bit of feedback too if anyone has the YouTube open.
There it goes.
Just want to mute. Excellent. All right. Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, everyone who is tuning in tonight. You're watching Berkeley Public Library's YouTube or Zoom channel, and we are delighted to be hosting the Cal Falcons team tonight to discuss Berkeley's favorite falcon family. Before we get started, there is a quick statement I would like to make, and an important statement too. The Berkeley Public Library acknowledges that we sit on the unceded traditional lands of the Ohlone people. We honor with the gratitude to the land itself, as well as the Ohlone people who still work, live, and play in this region. We stand in solidarity with all the marginalized people and celebrate the differences that contribute to the strength of our community. Everyone is welcome here at the Berkeley Public Library. All right, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're just so excited to give you this program and talk to the Cal Falcon team about what has been going up in the Campanile. I know that so many of us have been checking Berkeley side every week, talking to our friends and neighbors, checking Instagram, and following just the dramatic tale of what has gone on with Annie, Grinnell, and Alden. So we really appreciate the insight tonight. Speaking tonight is Lynn Schofield. Lynn is an ecologist with the Institute for Bird Populations and an educator for Cal Falcons. Sean Peterson received his PhD recently from UC Berkeley in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management, and now is a postdoc researcher at SUNY SEF. And both Lynn and Sean are ornithologists. We ask that you please save questions for the end of this presentation. While you can type them into the chat, we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. Also, we do have to wrap up the presentation at 8:15. That's really going to be a hard deadline tonight. So really, please be mindful of this while we're asking questions. My colleague Emma is over there in the corner. She made these fantastic shirts we're wearing tonight, and she will also be helping facilitate the questions later tonight. So thank you so much, Cal Falcon team, for not only putting on this program tonight, but just doing an incredible job guiding us through this incredible falcon season. I'm also going to add into the chat information on our new circulating collection, binoculars donated by Sean and Lynn. We have 9 pairs of binoculars that will soon be available for checkout, and you can put them on hold by searching for binoculars in our library catalog. I will also add links to our upcoming bird programs in the chat. All right, go ahead and take it away, Sean and Lynn. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the great introduction, Kelsey. I'm really happy to be talking for you guys. Berkeley Public Library, you guys pretty much for like, I rely on the public library, man.
We basically live there here in Berkeley.
Yeah, but all right, so today's talk is keeping up with the Campanile. And really, we're just going to try to do a recap of everything that has happened with our falcon family over the past several years, because The cast of characters has grown and a lot has happened over the last year, and a lot of people have kind of been interested in having just the full backstory shared. So before I get started too much, me and Sean, we do a lot of the social media stuff. So we are the ones kind of appearing on, these little educational things, but we're really not the, entirety of Cal Falcons. There's a bunch of people written here. We have Mary Malik, who does all sorts of in-person monitoring. Alan Fish is at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. Doug Bell, East Bay Parks. Carla Cicero's at Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. Pete Sharp helped us set up the camera. So we're the people that always end up in these little Zoom chats, but there are a whole lot of people who've been working really hard with the Cal Falcon stuff. So thanks to everybody with that. And I will okay, so we'll start with some Peregrine fun facts just to get us warmed up here. I suspect people attending, we have some familiarity with the Peregrine falcon, but there's there's a kind of a few fun facts I'd like to go over. So for one, Peregrine falcons are found worldwide. Their primary requirement when it comes to habitat is having a place with sufficient ledges and cliff sides to make their nests. So there are no Peregrine falcons in the Amazon rainforest because there aren't really any cliffs there. There are no Peregrine falcons in Antarctica because the cliffs there are covered in ice, but otherwise they're pretty much everywhere. And that's, pretty unique. There are very few species that can truly be found worldwide. The next two facts kind of go hand in hand. A lot of people, kind of know this fact. The Peregrine falcon is the world's fastest animal. They achieve speeds of over 240 miles per hour. And it's definitely over 240 miles per hour is where people stop really being able to measure it beyond that. So, but they do a power dive. So they are making incredible feats of aerodynamic, and this is so they can catch their prey midair. That is their hunting strategy, is to dive at incredible speeds on unsuspecting prey. And not only are Peregrine falcons found nesting worldwide, they also can travel between breeding grounds and winter grounds right across the world, as far as 15,000 miles between a nest site and a wintering site. And people who have tracked adult Peregrine falcons have found them flying up to 1,000 miles in a single day. And then the fun fact we'll touch on more is Peregrine falcons are really one of these wonderful conservation success stories where people came together and were actually, able to solve this, what seemed pretty intractable conservation issue. But keeping up with the Campaniles, introducing our cast, and I'll let you.
Our cast of main characters that we have. So first up is Annie. She's the territorial female. She is at least 7 years old. We don't know exactly how old she is because she was never banded. So we know that when she showed up in 2016, 2017, she had full adult plumage, and we can know that she was at least 2 years old at that point. And that's kind of all we've got to go on. Her likes are pigeons and fluffling the chicks and being in charge. Next up is Grinnell. So Grinnell is a territorial male. He was hatched and banded in 2014. His likes are looking at the camera, sitting on eggs, and blackbirds. And then our next main character is new to this season, I guess would be the story, is Alden. So Alden is also a territorial male. He's at least 2 years old. Again, we don't know exactly how old because he was not banded. And his likes are hunting at night, which is a little bit odd for a peregrine. He likes loafing on the tower, and he really likes water birds, which has been really kind of interesting to see what he's been bringing this year. The next set of main characters are the chicks. And so we have had 15 chicks in total. We've had 3 females, 10 males, and then this year we do not know what the sexes of those chicks are yet. Those 2 chicks are yet. We will find out on the 27th. And their likes are Annie, food comas, and being fluffy. And now we get to the antagonists of our story, the interlopers. So there's been at least 12, probably more, non-territorial birds who have investigated the Campanile over the years, more this last year than previous years. They're often juvenile birds, so only 1 year old, and they're really kind of looking for their place in the world. And they're kind of what has been described to us as agents of chaos. They just kind of show up and they just kind of are looking for their own space, but they kind of make a mess of things. But they also do like flirting with whoever is at the tower at the time, which is always interesting to see. And now you may be saying, wait, I thought peregrine falcons were rare, but you just listed off like 30 of them. 20 of them?
More, yeah. More,
Oh.
well, no, because we had 15 chicks,
15
12
chicks.
interlopers.
Yeah.
Okay, 30. That's 30 peregrine falcons. And aren't peregrine falcons rare? And the answer is wonderfully not anymore. But they were rare, really up until kind of recently. And so just as a very quick little bit of history, back in 1939, a biologist at the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology went on a study, and he mapped all of the known nesting territories of California's peregrine falcons, and he was able to locate 104. And then in 1970, Steve Herman revisited all the nests that were studied back in the 30s. And surveyed all other possible locations that peregrine falcons seemed like they might be nesting, and they found 2 nests in all. And interestingly, both of the nests were on Morro Rock here in California. And what is interesting to note is that these 2 nests actually represented all of the nests in the lower 48 states of the US. So, what happened? Why did we go in 1939 to 104 birds nesting, and in 1970 down to 2 pairs nesting? And the very short and simplistic answer is pretty much DDT became very popular for a little while. So popular that this is a legitimate ad extolling the virtues of DDT. It seemed like an absolute miracle chemical, because it was very effective at getting rid of pests, which is true. And on the surface, it didn't seem like it had any real harmful effects other than killing insects. And so a little is good to, maybe take care of your crops. So certainly more must be better. And so people were actually out doing things like spraying DDT across beaches where kids played to get rid of any annoying insects. Crops were being dusted, and of course what happens with large-scale agricultural use of chemicals is that it stops being as effective through time, and so more and more needed to be used for it to have any appreciable effect. And as I said, it seemed like it didn't have any negative side effects, of course, but really it was not the miracle chemical it seemed like, and now more and more, and it's pretty recently that people have been understanding the true human effects of DDT, because it is actually creates transgenerational effects. It has a lot of effects when it comes to reproduction and breast cancer and gestational age, but the effects of DDT on a grandparent will continue to be affecting the grandchild. So it turns out it's actually a pretty insidious chemical, but you have to have some time before you really see what the dangers of that was directly to people. So we know now in the 2000s, in retrospect, that DDT is not good for me. But we actually, well before all of these studies here that established the human effects of DDT, the people learned about the environmental effects first. And one of the sort of landmark things that helped raise awareness of the issue of chemicals and how they affect the environment is notably Rachel Carson. Her book Silent Spring is well known for bringing, the attention of people that the wildlife was being changed and it was actions of humans that was causing it. Kind of the classic quote is, "In nature, nothing exists alone." And it actually was a bit of a radical idea that things that go into the environment don't just go away. You can't, spray pesticides that kills insects and then it disappears, to somewhere. It turns out that there is not a single living organism on the planet currently that does not contain DDT. And so kind of the quick rundown, it was not called that back when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring in the 60s, but that DDT does what's called biomagnification. It will persist in tissues of an organism, and as one organism eats more of another, it builds up in tissues. So you start with some DDT out in the environment, then some small, phytoplankton type thing takes a little bit of it into it. Maybe some next level, a crustacean eats a bunch of those, and then it gets all of the exposure that they had combined in their tissues. Next level up is maybe the little ducks, and they end up collecting all of the DDT that collected up in their prey. And by the time you get to the peregrine falcon levels, you have hundreds of times of the background amount of DDT getting into their tissues. And it's still the case that DDT, although is not being sprayed, is still in the environment, mostly as the metabolite DDE, but everyone is still exposed to it. It is still in the tissues of all living organisms still. So where did Rachel Carson kind of get the insight that what people are doing in the environment is causing these long-term effects? And she got that insight from birds. And one of the many sources of data she had was, for example, from the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, which was one of the earliest preserves, and it was a preserve specifically set aside for migratory raptors. And so they had uniquely data from both before and after DDT had been introduced. And there's a little arrow there for when DDT was introduced, and that's when the number of peregrine falcons started declining. Well, this isn't peregrine falcons specifically, this is raptors in general. But that is the date when raptors started declining, including peregrine falcons. And research continued from there. This is outside of then what Carson was doing, but it was found that DDT interferes with calcium metabolism, and calcium is what eggshells are primarily made of. So a normal healthy peregrine egg has a, very strong and very durable eggshell. A bird with heavy DDT exposure, the eggshell becomes incredibly brittle and weak and is not able to be incubated by an adult without breaking. And so here's a little comparison of the pre-DDT eggshell thickness with the post-DDT eggshell thickness. So you can see that there is a sudden and distinct drop when DDT is introduced. Right there. So 1947, that was the very first applications of DDT. And so by 1972, because of the research finding what was happening in the environment, DDT was banned in the United States for agricultural use. But then, of course, the challenge is that they were down to 2 nesting peregrine falcons in all of California. No peregrine falcons remained in the eastern US. So the challenge was to undo that damage. And some very dedicated scientists, Tom Cade and Brian Walton among them, headed up the efforts to reintroduce peregrine falcons, to take a lot of these eggs that could not be incubated by adults and raise them in captivity, to create breeding programs and to attempt to bring the peregrine falcons back. And they would raise and release chicks into new habitats. And here's the legacy of Silent Spring. So this graph here is the number of hawks being observed per day at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, specifically peregrine falcons. 1962 is when Silent Spring was published. 1972 is where DDT was finally banned. 74 is where reintroduction started. 80s is where the reintroduction project finally started taking hold, and 1999 peregrine falcons ceased to be an endangered species, and as you can see, the numbers are continuing to go up. So with so many falcons now that we're seeing on the tower, 30, that means 15 times more than were in the lower 48 states. How do we tell them all apart?
Great question, Lynn. So there's a few different kind of visual cues we look at to try to tell all these falcons apart. The first thing is we often see juvenile birds at the tower, often as interlopers, or when our chicks get bigger, they look like juvenile birds. And so a juvenile peregrine falcon has the kind of stereotypical mask, dark mask that you see with peregrine falcons. Same as an adult, but it has really thick streaking on its chest compared with the very fine barring that an adult has. And they're also a lot more brown in coloration than the adults, which are much more of a slate gray. They also have kind of a little bit more of a bluish skin on their face, and than the adults, which have a very yellow skin. And then, of course, it's a little bit easier to tell the really tiny babies apart. But they kind of, when they're growing all their feathers, they grow all their down feathers in first, so they're able to thermoregulate and stay warm, stay the correct temperature first. And then they grow in all of their flight feathers and body feathers on top of that. So you get really kind of a funny teenage stage where they're kind of awkwardly fluffy in all sorts of places. And then telling the adults apart is can be difficult, and it actually is more difficult with Alden than it was with Grinnell. But one of the main things that we look for is size. And female peregrine falcons are substantially larger than males. The falconry term for a male falcon is the tercel, which is Latin for 1/3. Because females were 1/3 again larger than male falcons. So that was kind of how they differentiated them, is just by that size difference. And there's actually some really cool biology behind this. It's hypothesized that the reason why there's such a strong difference in size between males and females with peregrine falcons is that it means that the male and female on a territory are going to be specializing in different kinds of birds, so they won't actually be competing with each other for food. Annie is much more likely to chase stuff that's like a pigeon size, whereas Grinnell and Alden were often going after much smaller birds.
And I feel like then there's a couple others. So that's the basics, you know, are you seeing the male, the female, the adult, or juvenile? But it's also worth noting that different peregrines have subtle differences in a lot of different traits that you can pick up. And maybe I'm going to go to our little interloper page. Can I do that
Sure.
quickly? Ooh, okay. Okay, I guess. Anyways, there are subtle things that we are picking up on, and we intended to have a little slide with some more different birds, but point is, you can see the upper left-hand picture, for example, you can see there's fine streaking in Annie's chest, whereas in Grinnell's, it was almost totally white with no streaking. Some birds have a stronger mask shape. Some birds have a much lighter mask. Grinnell and Annie had different colors of feet. They'll have bluer or less blue feathers, so you can tell individuals apart, but it can be some pretty subtle tricks to do so. And I'll move. All right, so anyways, let's get keeping up with the Campaniles. There's our intro material.
We've been keeping up with them a lot.
And here's just a couple great pictures of the falcons on the iconic Campanile here up at the lantern and by the clock. These pictures are by Bridget Ahern, who is an absolutely wonderful photographer and has done a lot of work observing the birds from the ground and documenting their activities. So she is at Moon Rabbit Rising and has contributed a lot of amazing photography to us. But all right, so meet the falcons. We have our female, Annie, and the original male, Grinnell. So Annie, she was named Annie after Annie Montague Alexander, who was the founder of Berkeley's Museum of Paleontology and Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. So she was a biologist and pioneer. She went out on multiple expeditions with what is otherwise a very male-dominated field, and it was her inheritance from the Grizzly Island, or I guess not inheritance, but her company, the Grizzly Island asparagus and other produce, that gave her the money to be able to fund the Museum of Paleontology and the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. And notably, Annie Alexander, this monument down in the bottom is it's a monument that was set up for her with something that had apparently been said of her many times. She found men a nuisance on her arduous field trips. Her companion and partner, and would have in modern times certainly have been her wife, Louise Kellogg, was the companion that came with her on expeditions.
And one of the things I think that's really remarkable about Annie Alexander is, if scientists are lucky, and this is changing now, which I think is probably for the best, but if they're lucky, they get one species named after them. And Annie Alexander had 12 species named after her because of the amount of work that she put into scientific expeditions. So she's just an amazing scientist.
And then we have Grinnell, and he is named after Joseph Grinnell, who is the first curator of the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. So he was appointed by Annie Alexander. Yeah. Anyways, Annie Alexander hired Joseph Grinnell essentially, and Joseph Grinnell was a real visionary as an ecologist, because he had the insight that people in the future would want to know what the world looked like in their time, that people would want to be able to look back on where wildlife was, the characteristics of wildlife, and all the various observations made. So Joseph Grinnell was in charge of a statewide survey project collecting data on pretty much every species of vertebrate across the state, and kept meticulous notes and records. And he was very right. These data have now been used. UC Berkeley's been conducting a Grinnell resurvey project where they're going back to all of Joseph Grinnell's original historical data and comparing it with observations made now. And a lot of what we know about how human development and climate change is effect on natural systems has to do with the fact that Joseph Grinnell's data existed to compare. So anyways, let's get to our story. Moving in, Annie and Grinnell were first sighted in the winter of 2016-2017. And so here is, I register a lot of my bird observations into a little website called eBird. And so I actually was able to look back and identify what the first time was that I found two peregrine falcons hanging out together on the clock tower. And so that's the first time I wrote it down myself. And I think a bunch of other people kind of concurrently started noticing that there's this pair of peregrine falcons. And by April, it was, apparent that they were spending time there, and it was the same pair that was spending time. So the Daily Cal wrote up an article about the Campanile as UC Berkeley's temporary home, although it turned out that it was a permanent home. And once we realized it was a permanent home, and that the pair of falcons were apparently demonstrating behaviors indicating that they were attempting to nest, we decided to, as Cal falcons in general, go up and see what was up there and to see if they had a viable nest site. I'll hand this over to you more because
Yeah. So going up to the top of the Campanile is actually really kind of crazy because you have to go like inside a secret door, inside one of the pillars on the bell level, and then go up this twisty spiral staircase that, I mean, you just barely fit into. And so we got all the way up to the top of the tower, didn't know what we were going to see.
I only made it through my claustrophobia by reminding myself that we were going to check on the falcons. It was worth it.
Worth it for the
For the
falcons. And we got up to the kind of the cupola on top of the building, and you could kind of see through some slats what was out there. And just as soon as we got up there, you could see these just piercing eyes staring right back at you through the wall of the cupola, through these slats. And so we knew that Annie was just sitting right there. And we still didn't know what the nest looked like or if there was one. So we kind of snuck out there and were able to kind of get our first glimpse of this nest site, which was in this torn open sandbag. And it was not a very good nest. There were, in addition to the 3 eggs you see here, 2 other eggs had rolled off to the side and were no longer on the nest. So they were trying to make do with it, but they really needed a better spot. So that same day, we quickly installed this tray of gravel and put the eggs back in place. And we monitored their behavior and everything to make sure they accepted the new tray and nest site, and everything went great. And that year we had 2 chicks hatch, which were named Fiat and Lux, and they were banded on the tower. And unfortunately, Lux actually died that year right after it fledged. I think it was about a week after it flew for the first time. It flew into a window on Evans Hall and died, which was really pretty tragic. But campus really stepped up big time and installed bird safe streamers all over Evans Hall and a lot of the other buildings on campus. It was a really amazing kind of outpouring of support from campus to kind of keep these birds safe. In 2018, we installed a permanent nest box for them, and so they got kind of upgraded digs. So every few years, we need to go up there and change the gravel, make sure everything's looking tidy. And then every year after the breeding season is over, we go up there with a bunch of mops and scrapers and try to clean up everything that the peregrines have left behind.
Yeah, and I'll just get out ahead of this because a lot of people will, ask, isn't that kind of a harsh surface to be nesting on? Just a box of gravel? Don't they have like a nest? And the answer is peregrine falcons, they are adapted to nesting on ledges, on cliff faces, and the rocky substrate is what they're adapted to lay their eggs on. There's a lot of benefits to the rocky substrate. among other things, it doesn't stay dirty as long as if they had, for example, like a stick nest, which would get full of prey and poop and eventually become a problem. So actually for peregrine falcons, this is a pretty good solution. So this nest box is pretty much exactly what a peregrine falcon hopes for, which is a substrate that has decent drainage so they can keep the eggs dry below, that they are somewhat protected from wind as they are under here. So this is what a peregrine falcon nest is supposed to be.
In 2018, the Annie and Grinnell fledged 3 chicks. They were named Berkelium, Californium, and Lawrencium after 3 of the elements that were discovered at UC Berkeley.
And a little more on the falcon naming in a little bit, because we've held annual naming contests for the falcon chicks. And so this year's naming contest will be coming up. So we'll want people to have ideas to submit to us soon. But we'll talk about that more. But just on chick naming, that's how they get their names, is their name suggested from the public and that people get to vote on.
We had a brief scare when California aired into Evans Hall. He was retrieved before he got hurt, checked out at Lindsay Wildlife Hospital, and returned to the tower where he successfully fledged. Luckily, this has been our last incident where we have had any chicks get into trouble, and that is probably partially due to the parents being able to learn the area a lot better and be able to guide the chicks in their first few flights into safe directions.
Yeah, and so I will say every year, and this year as well, we do hold what we call a fledge watch. And so the days when the chicks are getting ready for their first flights, we have a group of volunteers who will spend time below the Campanile, keeping an eye out in case something like this does happen and the chicks do need to be rescued from a spot like this where they ended up kind of inside of a courtyard that they couldn't have gotten out of, or end up in a road or another unsafe location. So they have volunteers keeping an eye out when they take these first flights. And so thank you to all of the fledge watchers who've helped with this through time. And yeah.
In 2019, we had the kind of major development of crowdfunding some cameras for the top of the tower. So that was all money that was donated by the public, and like it's just a really amazing kind of show of support for these birds, and that allowed us to really kind of be able to show what life is like for these animals on the Campanile, and really kind of be able to peek into these amazing birds.
So we are now on live 24/7. You can go right now and see exactly what they're up to right this second. And
we get to see, like, part of the amazing thing about these cameras is you just get to see all of the behavior, everything, and then stuff that you kind of, as a biologist, you never you dream of seeing this kind of thing at this distance. And so being able to see, the eggs being laid and being cared for, or the chicks hatching and being fed for the first time, it's just really amazing to be able to experience that. And to get to see them growing up into these awkward teenagers, and then getting all the way to when they're learning to fly. It's very fun to be able to follow that.
yeah, and I feel like it's just worth mentioning that these are day and a half, 2-day-old chicks here, and the time that they take their first flight is usually 33 days after their hatch.
Yeah, I think up to 40 maybe.
Up to 40 days after the hatch. Okay, yeah, you're right. 33 days from laying to hatch, and then about 38 to 42 to fly. But point is, these little babies and this falcon just starting to fly, that's only
a little over a month.
A little over a month. It's incredible how fast they grow, and it's amazing to be able to really see that in real time with the webcams. So our first clutch of 2019 that we were able to watch with the webcams in the box and really follow their progress. They were named Carson and Cade in honor of the people that I kind of covered in our brief little primer on peregrine falcon conservation. Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, and then Tom Cade, the person who led the Peregrine Fund in their reintroduction of the falcons. So we honored them. Well, the public honored them. The suggestions were brought forth by the public and voted on. So, but they were honored because of their role in allowing us to have these falcons on the Campanile that we were able to follow as a community. So, Rachel Carson and Tom Cade. 2020, we got to follow Poppy, Sequoia, and Redwood. And 2021, we followed Fauci, Cockney, and Weck.
And so very briefly, we're just kind of going to pause our timeline because we're going to do a little kind of spur story on Laurentium, who is affectionately known as Larry. So Larry was a female chick from 20, oh no, I got the years, 20.
She's 2018.
2018. So class of 2018. So she's 4 years old this year. But she was, banded at the Campanile in, let's see, May of 2018. And then she was seen again in August, all the way over in the Marin Headlands.
Oh, the little cutout.
Where she looked a lot different than the last time we saw her. So, it only took her 100 days to go from that fluffy pile of fluff to a really, really amazing looking falcon. And she was a huge falcon. When they banded her, she was gigantic, much bigger than Annie.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here, the reason that she is in hand right now is that she ended up being caught by the volunteers, the banders at the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. And that is a group that has been doing research with migratory raptors for over 35 years now. And they, among other things, will band migratory birds that they catch moving through the headlands. So it is kind of an exceptional amount of coincidence that birds that were banded here on the Campanile, one of them ended up flying and getting once again caught by researchers studying the peregrine falcons. But it allowed us to get this extra little glimpse into what Larry's life was like right after she left the nest.
And then we lost Larry for, I think, 2 years. And then we had reports of her again on Alcatraz. And she was with a mate, which was really exciting. Alcatraz has never had a peregrine falcons nesting on the island, so they were pretty excited about this development. But we knew who she was because of her leg bands. That tells you exactly who the individual is. And then the next year after that, we got our first reports of Larry having chicks. So that made Annie and Grinnell grandparents for the first time that we know of, which was really kind of a fun development.
All right, and now here we are in the current season, and it has been probably our most dramatic season in a lot of ways, which is sort of stressful. We used to like to refer to the Cal Falcons cam as slow TV. You can kind of watch it and not too much happens, is how it was a long time. You get to see some baby falcons. But it's been a little more dramatic than that. So starting in the fall of 2021, we unexpectedly got the news that somebody had found a peregrine falcon that was injured near campus, and it was brought to the Lindsay Wildlife Center, where they treated what turned out to be Grinnell. So our territorial male and the father of all those chicks had been injured in what was apparently an altercation with another pair of falcons. He had puncture wounds, and he was seen interacting with this pair pair of falcons prior to his being picked up.
And then within a few days of Grinnell's injury, a new male showed up at the tower, and Annie seemed to take a liking to him. So at this point, we had a situation where, as far as Annie knew, Grinnell was gone, and she had a new male kind of showing up and checking out the territory, and she wanted to check him out too.
But Grinnell, he recovered. It took about 3 weeks.
Yeah, about 3
Yeah, it
weeks.
took him about 3 weeks to recover, and he was released near the Lawrence Hall of Sciences with the thought that he would be able to see his own territory, but could choose to approach or not, depending on what Grinnell felt was what he wanted to do, if he wanted to end up in a potential confrontation with a competitor or not. And we were very anxious at Grinnell being re-released, knowing that it's possible he'd end up in a fight with another falcon again. But we are happy to say that on New Year's Day, Grinnell showed back up on campus and on the Campanile. So we
And pair bonded with Annie, and
a big sigh of relief seeing them back together again after many weeks of them being apart. But then it turned out that that was not going to be the most significant development of the season. Spring was characterized by an awful lot of rivals taking a look at the Campanile as a potential territory, and that means also new arrivals that were having altercations with Annie and Grinnell, the territory holders. And so we caught at least 12 distinguishably different individuals on the Campanile at different times interacting with Annie and Grinnell.
And just, going back to our earlier story, that's 12 birds were at the tower over the spring. There were some days where we had 6 birds at the tower. When you think that in the 70s, the late 70s, there were 4 peregrine falcons in the entirety of the lower 48 United States. That's just crazy that they were able to come back.
Yeah, and so all these different encounters with interlopers, some were individuals that we recognized and would see multiple times. Some of the individuals were probably birds migrating through and only stopped by briefly. But we had kind of quite a cast of characters for a while. And then we thought we lost Annie, the female. She ended up going missing for over a week. We had not seen Annie, which is very odd in the very middle of when the peregrine falcons should be starting to lay eggs, while she had already kind of laid down all the groundwork for getting the pair bond ready with Grinnell. They had been mating, and so we were expecting eggs, and what we had instead was Annie disappearing for well over a week. And what clinched it for us is that this here is Grinnell with a very large juvenile female that Grinnell is starting to make indications that he is interested in her as a partner. These little head bows are courtship behaviors, and if Annie were present, she would not allow a competitor to be spending time on her tower, on her territory, and with her mate. So we were pretty confident that perhaps Annie wouldn't be dead, but she had to have gone somewhere. And so we expected that she had left the territory entirely at best.
And then the day after we announced this, Annie showed back up in the nest box.
Yep, there's Annie, like nothing was wrong.
And it was just mind-blowing to us. Like, this was so different from typical peregrine behavior that we were just at a bit of a loss on what to even say. Like, it was just amazing that she came back.
So Queen Annie was back. And then
A few weeks after that, we had our first egg of the season, and everything just seemed like it was going back on
Yep.
track. Everything was going great.
here's egg number one. But then shortly after Annie had laid her second egg, and when we were expecting the first egg, or the third egg to be laid, Grinnell was found dead in downtown Berkeley, hit by a car, which people have asked quite a lot about the cause of death, and is there some sort of, conspiracy, and was he really hit by a car? And the answer is, he did get struck by a car, but it is indeed kind of strange for a peregrine falcon to be flying so low that it would be possible to be struck by a car. And we do know that Grinnell was in an altercation with a young juvenile female bird in the hours before he passed. And so we suspect that there might be some connection there. It's also possible he was flying so low in traffic because he had been chasing a prey item and not noticed, or struck a window, but
It'll probably always be a mystery. It's hard to know why he was that low.
Anyway, so after against all odds that Grinnell was injured and came back, and then Annie was lost and came back, we thought everything was going to go great. We had the eggs, they were getting ready to have chicks, and Grinnell was lost. And this is really tough for people. And I meant to give you the picture of the full memorial, because it turns out there was a huge outpouring of there's just a huge outpouring from people who had been following the Falcons over the past several years, and people were really very devastated at Grinnell's loss. I certainly was, because Grinnell was I took a lot of joy in watching the Peregrine Falcons, and having Grinnell be lost so soon before his chicks were going to start to be incubated was really hard. And so we had a big outpouring of support. Lots of people provided art, and a little memorial built up around the Campanile, and it kind of felt like this was where the story was going to end, that we lost Grinnell. But then who shows up but this odd male falcon? And this male falcon was actually kind of an interesting bird, because we recognized it as one of those 12 outsider birds, but this one was uniquely a bird that Annie and Grinnell did not mind a ton. They would be present on the tower while this bird was present, and not aggressively chase him off. And so we actually started theorizing that maybe this was going to be a helper falcon, which is very, very rare in peregrines, but occasionally a third bird will come and help a little bit around the nest.
We actually, prior to Grinnell's death, about a week before his death, we think Alden, we didn't know it was Alden at the time, brought Annie a bird, which is kind of really unique behavior to see for an interloper. This is a bird we recognize, and he showed up again the day after, or actually the day that Grinnell died. He spent the entire night on the tower next to Annie on the balcony, and he kind of just stepped right in to the role of mate.
And which, before I get people going, did this bird murder Grinnell? We have absolutely no reason to suspect that to be the case. One, because Grinnell did not have negative interactions with this bird. Grinnell tolerated this bird's presence. So they wouldn't have been fighting. And two, the bird that Grinnell had been having an altercation with was a juvenile female who was a distinctly different bird. So yeah, no, Alden was just there at the time when he was needed. So he
And so we should mention that, like, when a peregrine falcon dies in the middle of the breeding season, when a mated pair dies in the middle of the breeding season, the vast majority of the time the nest will fail as well. It really does take two adults to succeed at a nest. And so we really thought at this point that the nest was going to fail. Despite Annie's supernatural parenting abilities, it would be incredibly unlikely that she could care for the chicks and the eggs on her own. And then normal peregrine pair bonding behavior takes weeks, if not months, to set up a pair bond. So we didn't expect, another bird to come in and be able to take over caring for these eggs. But Alden was accepted almost instantly. They set up a pair bond right away. We're doing displays in the nests. And then a couple of days later, Annie actually laid a third egg. So she had felt positively enough about Alden that she laid another egg in the nest.
Yeah, we were not expecting this at all. She was about when Grinnell died, was about when she was going to lay her third egg. Peregrine falcons typically lay 4 eggs and they're spaced apart a day and a half. And that point that she was supposed to lay the third egg when Grinnell died, she did not lay that egg in the nest at all. We suspect she laid it somewhere outside of the nest because she felt it was unsafe to put an egg there. And so that she did end up laying a third egg kind of indicates that she felt confident enough that she could have that third egg and raise it. You can do this part because our son was sleeping right there.
Our toddler just woke up. Well, we had Alden kind of settling in on the territory. We decided, well, he seems to be kind of taking up the mantle of a co-parent. He should probably be given a name. So we had our kind of naming contest, and Alden was named after Alden Miller, who was the second director of the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. You may remember that Joseph Grinnell was the first. So people really kind of resonated with this idea that Alden was the successor of Joseph Grinnell. He was Grinnell's student, and then he took over for Grinnell after Grinnell retired. So that was kind of a really kind of poignant idea for people that Alden the bird was stepping in to help out with Grinnell's nest, just the way that Alden Miller stepped in to kind of fill the shoes of Joseph Grinnell. And Alden's really kind of taken amazingly to being a mate and parent. He has been doing everything that we hope to see a male peregrine do. He's been catching food for the nest and bringing it back. He was taking over incubation duties, taking care of the eggs, which was really cool to see. And then on May 5th, we had our first egg hatch. So Annie and Alden did a wonderful job incubating the eggs, and were able to hatch 2 of them. And so there's our first sighting of the first chick. And we ended up with 2 chicks this year. And there they are in all their fluffy glory. So that was May 7th. So that was when one chick was 2 days old and one chick was 1 day old. And Alden has started to try to kind of be a parent to the chicks, but Annie has been really kind of trying to take over primary feeding duties, which we never saw this behavior with Grinnell, but we also never saw the first 2 years of Annie and Grinnell's relationship together, because we didn't have cameras up on the tower. So it could be that she treated Grinnell this way too when they were first kind of a mated pair, or it could be that she just is still not quite used to Alden yet. But he was kind of kept trying to bring food to the chicks, but only for Annie to kind of take it away and feed them. But he also he tried to bring them birds. He also tried to bring them a moth the other day, which was pretty hilarious. Before Annie kind of came in, and then also kind of tried to feed the moth to the chicks before she ate it herself. And I think a lot of people are always kind of really like mystified when they see a peregrine falcon with a moth. But it's not uncommon for them to go after them, especially on the tower. And the chicks actually kind of learn to hunt initially by chasing stuff like moths. But just the other day, on the 18th, Alden did finally get to feed his chicks. We were really happy to see that he finally got a chance to feed it, although it was a bit chaotic. He still is kind of trying to figure out his way through interacting with these much bigger chicks than he kind of maybe thought he was going to be interacting with, and they kept trying to steal the food from him, which was pretty awesome to see. And that kind of brings you up to right now. And so what's next on tap for Annie and Alden and the chicks? Well, May 27th is banding day. And that same day, we will find out the sexes of the chicks. And we will start our annual naming contest. So we will be soliciting name suggestions that weekend over the starting the 27th. And then we'll compile everyone's favorite name suggestions into a final vote that next week. And then the chicks are likely to fledge about June 15th. So that's when we'll all be out with binoculars and cameras and everything, and trying to keep an eye on them and make sure that they stay safe in their first flights. And with that, we kind of have caught up to right now. So I'm going to give you all a huge thank you for listening in with us. And then I also need to thank like the amazing number of people who have really helped out on this project, from the people at UC Berkeley who have gotten all the cameras up and worked with facilities management, and all the people on the ground who have helped us with Fledge Watch and other activities to keep the birds safe. It's just truly an amazing number of people who have helped out. And I think that we can take some questions, I think, if we have time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this great presentation. And yes, the Cal Falcons is a lovely team full of people. I got to meet some of them on Hatch Day, and there's just so many great Berkeley community members and members in the Cal Falcon team sharing the Cal Falcon news with us. All right, so let's go ahead and take questions. Please enter questions in the Zoom chat or YouTube chat.
I can ask the first question. We have a question about where Grinnell was hatched. Do we know that?
We know roughly. He was actually he was a rehab bird. So someone found him on the ground and brought him to Lindsay Wildlife, I believe. So we know roughly that he was from somewhere around Martinez, but we don't know the exact nest site. But roughly around Martinez is where he was from.
And then in the YouTube chat, Dirk asks, hello and thank you from Melbourne, Australia. Okay, so yes, someone's tuning in from Australia tonight. It's been absolutely amazing. Would you like to talk about some of the international attention that
it's well, it was very surprising.
Very surprising.
You know, we thought when we had these cameras crowdfunded and had them all set up, we would have like 10 people tuning in, and
Be like, we were imagining it'd be like a thing that brought like maybe the campus like bio
yeah,
people together, like you know.
But it's just been really fun to see, just people from all over the world tuning in to check out Annie and Grinnell and Alden and all their chicks. And yeah, it's just been really fun. And it's I just always love seeing, all the hellos from other countries as people tune in.
All right, and another question from YouTube. Deborah asks, what will Annie and Alden do after the chicks leave the nest?
That is kind of entirely unknown.
Grinnell and Annie, they're both homebodies, although some peregrine falcons will migrate tens of thousands of miles between winter and nest grounds, the 15,000 miles record there. Annie and Grinnell did not display amazing feats of migration. In the winter, they spent time a little more in downtown. Yeah, that's about how far they went in the winter.
Yeah.
And so Annie will likely, once the chicks are fledged, stay on the territory. They are in a privileged position in the Bay Area that there are abundant pigeons and nice weather year round. Alden, on the other hand, we don't know exactly what he'll do in the winter. He might choose another location as his wintering grounds. For all we know, he might be a migratory individual and has somewhere that he migrates to, or most likely, I think he'll opt to maintain the territory throughout the year like Annie and Grinnell do because of the good conditions and abundant food. But yeah, we'll find out. They don't spend nearly as much time on the clock tower specifically in winter, but you can see them around campus and around downtown pretty regularly. If you know what to listen for.
Yeah, if you're going and getting some binoculars from the downtown library branch, take a look up on the top of the buildings downtown in winter, and you'll have a pretty decent chance of seeing them.
We have seen them from the library multiple times. So
It's true. I've seen them from the 4th floor of the Central Library. We have a question about the 3rd egg and what its fate will be. Will it explode?
Won't explode. So Annie has never hatched all her eggs that she's laid in any given year. And typically what happens is it gets kicked to the side or accidentally broken open. One year they ate it after it broke, but usually it's just ignored. Some peregrine falcon nests have actually had eggs from over a few years ago still in the nest that are just kind of there and ignored. So likely nothing is going to happen, but we'll see. They might eat it, they might break it. We'll kind of see.
Wow. We have another question from YouTube. From Gail, do you have any new ideas about Alden's leg injury?
So we're pretty sure the leg injury is something that he has had for some time. He's had it as long as we've been seeing him showing up at the Campanile. So so he's had it now at least for several months, but it appears from, our outside perspective that it is some sort of old injury, that perhaps a break that never healed fully or healed improperly. But presumably Alden will always have, have that injury. And, but it doesn't seem to be affecting his success at caring for his chicks. So go Alden.
We have a question from Zoom. It says, in quotes, most of Annie and Grinnell's chicks have been male. Is this just the luck of the gamete, or is there a biological tilt on sex distribution in peregrines?
So
This is a great question.
the most probable answer is yes. It's just a
Just random.
It's just random chance. In birds, sex distribution is determined very similar to how it is in people, whereas people have the XY chromosome determining sex. Birds, it's the Z and W. But the difference is that a female has the two different ones. They have a Z and a W, and it's the males that have two of the same. But it's the same sort of coin flip thing. Do you inherit the different one or the same one? So in theory, it should be 50-50 distribution. We have all sorts of wild speculation about things, though. Falcons are capable of parthenogenesis, theoretically. Well, birds are capable of.
For sure.
Condors have been seen to do this. Turkeys have, and that's when a female lays an egg that's unfertilized but has two copies of its own gametes and can lay and raise that egg. So we have all sorts of wild speculation that maybe Annie is secretly having parthenogenic chicks because it's more likely to be the male, but no, it's just chance.
And we should mention that in other species that are relatively closely related to birds and reptiles, sex is actually determined by the temperature that the egg is developing at. And so that's actually something that's a bit of a big concern with climate change in reptiles, is that you'll have a very skewed sex distribution with temperatures kind of increasing. But for birds, it is just the genes.
And another question from Zoom is, do we know how old Alden is?
Our best guess, or we know that he's at least 2 years old, because he was in full adult plumage. It takes 2 years for them to get their full adult plumage when we first saw him. So that's our baseline. We think he's probably younger than Annie, but that would be mostly speculation.
Yeah, just speculation based on, the fact that he's, establishing a new territory now, and also that he seems, not necessarily as confident as an experienced breeder. Makes us speculate he's somewhat younger, but we have no way of knowing, and his slight hesitation with some things could just be that this is a new situation for him that he's sort of very suddenly ended up in with the nest and the Campanile and everything. So
Commenting on Alden, as a parent, Julia and Sally ask, Alden keeps bringing in surprising prey. Is anyone keeping track of what all the birds he has brought are, and also any guesses where he is hunting? I would love to go bird watching.
He has been bringing in some really interesting prey. We mentioned very early in the presentation, he likes water birds. So he has brought in, I think, at least 8 species of water birds that we've seen.
yeah, he's brought in phalaropes, which are a shorebird that floats on the water more than runs along the shore. He's brought in several of those, different sandpipers,
two different species of terns at least.
Anyway,
a skimmer, we think. It's been an incredible variety of water birds. So he's hunting somewhere down by the bay. What's interesting is that some of the birds that he's getting are relatively uncommon for people to see. So he might be hunting further offshore than we expected, and getting stuff that people don't really see very often. But
we also know he's hunting at night, and a lot of migratory birds fly at night during their migratory flights. So he might also be finding odd prey items because he is looking for birds at night that are migrating and looking a little lost. And unfortunately, the birds that are looking a little lost are a little more likely to be on the rarer side.
And I guess related to the prey, another question from YouTube. Where does Annie take her stripped bird carcasses?
So they actually are often almost entirely consumed. There's sometimes nothing left. Sometimes you'll see her bring the prey item in and feed the chicks and then not move, and there's nothing left. But there often are feathers or some bones and stuff. Typically, we do find some of those when we go up to clean the campanile, but a lot of them just get blown off the side of the campanile eventually. And so she doesn't really dispose of them. They don't like kind of tidy up their nest site the way some birds do. But
Yeah, and I guess I interpreted this question the other way around, which is you interpreted what she's doing with them after eating. And I was thinking, where were they stashing the prey before it gets eaten? Because oftentimes they will end up with more prey items than they're able to eat right away. So they will cache prey before they're ready to feed it to the chicks. And we know that they do cache some prey on Evans Hall, and we know they also cache some prey on ledges on the campanile. So they have a little bit of food that they keep hanging around ready to go.
I have a question on the Zoom chat. Have any rival birds come around since the chicks have hatched?
not close to the nest. There's been some flyovers, and we've definitely heard them go out to chase off other birds, but not anywhere near the chicks.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if part of it might be at this point, all of these vagrant birds have kind of found a place to spend their season. Or it is also possible, it appears that Alden is very effective at defending the nest site from other birds. He might be really keeping birds away, you know, almost entirely. But yes, because he can be very aggressive, apparently. We've seen a couple times early on when he arrived, interacting with outsiders.
Hank asks, will you be able to determine if Alden and Grinnell each fathered one of the chicks?
Maybe. Maybe. So you can, you know, use genetic tests to determine if, you know, if the birds are related. There are, you know, essentially the equivalent of a paternity test that can be done. And although we probably wouldn't independently just do it for curious, we have been also considering that it would be very useful to have a study where we looked at the genetic relatedness of Bay Area peregrine falcons in general to get an idea of kind of where the different birds are coming from, if there's several different distinct populations, or if they all end up being sort of very closely related within the region. So we might find out who they're related to kind of as a larger study. Either way, when chicks are being banded, they take feather samples. And these feather samples originally have been for tests of heavy metal levels in animal tissues and stuff like that. But you can also, from these feather samples, get genetic material. So we will have the samples available to us to find out.
And I should, you know, also mention this is kind of maybe a question that wasn't asked, but is kind of worth touching on for people. So we think that the third egg is one of the eggs that hatched, and then one of the first two is another one that hatched. And the way bird biology works is the ovum is released into the reproductive tract of the female bird when it is fertilized. And so the first two eggs that Annie laid were almost certainly Grinnell's chicks, Grinnell's eggs. they because he was the one that had been mating with her. The third egg would have been released from the ovary at a time when it could be either Alden's or Grinnell's. Birds can store sperm, female birds can store sperm in their reproductive tract for up to 2 weeks. So we just have absolutely no idea who the parent of the father of the third egg could be. And so that would be the really big mystery egg. And we think that that is one of the eggs that hatched. So that would be potentially where we'd have one chick would be potentially Alden's and one chick would potentially be Grinnell's.
I have a question. How vulnerable were the chicks when they were stretched out like they were yesterday afternoon?
Yes, a lot of people were concerned with the hot weather baby falcon behavior. And it looks pretty concerning to see them, they're dealing with the heat by, I don't know, doing what any of us would do, which is to stretch out as much as possible and kind of
Air everything out.
Yeah, air everything out a little bit. So they definitely did not look happy in the heat, but that was typical behavior from a falcon chick in that sort of weather.
And as we mentioned earlier, peregrines are found pretty much worldwide, including in some of the hottest deserts and other locations in the world. So physiologically, they are definitely capable of handling that level of heat. It's not comfortable, obviously, for them, but this is something that we've seen every year, that there's been a few really hot days where the chicks have had to kind of employ different strategies to mitigate heat stress.
All right, thank you. Christine asks, has the issue with the drones been resolved?
Not fully resolved, but I think now that
It seems like word has gotten out a little bit about it. People have been doing a very good job of sharing that there's an issue with the drone thing, because we have found with drone pilots, so the drones, just they are a hazard. One, because if the disturbance is continuous enough and at kind of the wrong parts of the year, egg laying especially is kind of the wrong part of the year, because that's when they're, deciding if a place does feel safe enough to, trust their eggs to. Drones can be a problem because egg laying, it can harass them. And then later it can be a problem because they might swoop on a drone and injure themselves when they expect to hit a bird and hit a drone instead. So anyways, it is a problem, but we have found that most people who do end up flying the drones and we find them near campus, they're people who were just not aware of the situation. And we've at least been doing a lot of work to try to alert people to this. It has been passed around on social media quite a bit, and people in person have on multiple occasions found and told people that you can't fly drones in the area. So there has been less of it. So I'm hoping that kind of that message is getting across.
it's a really hard problem to solve, because when you have a drone, you are basically given authorization to use it in a place by the FAA, and there's a bunch of different apps that check the FAA's data on whether an area is valid to fly drones. But that's only pulling the federal level of data and doesn't include local ordinances. So Berkeley's drone ban is not noted by any of the drone flight apps. So it's just people don't know, and we've been trying really hard to educate as best we can, and hopefully it's kind of working.
Another question. It seems like Alden had a brood patch when he moved from understudy to main male. What factors, behavioral or seasonal, trigger the formation of that patch?
So it's a hormonal response. And in females, it's triggered by the actual development of the eggs. And I don't know in males what triggers it. You?
Mm-mm. No, you're usually the one who knows the physiology answers.
No, yeah, you stumped me on that one.
It is part of our theories about him being a helper male, though, with the circumstantial evidence of shorebirds suddenly appearing to Annie when Grinnell was not around, but Alden was, and them being all right with him around and his touch of a brood patch. If only we got to find out.
Yeah, yep, that would have been really interesting.
But yeah, I don't know what is the trigger for developing the brood patch in a male.
And we should just explain to people, the brood patch is a bare patch of skin that develops on the belly of both male and female birds in many species, most species, where they have highly vascularized skin, where lots of blood vessels going through the skin. It gets all wrinkly, and it's basically the best way to transmit heat from the parent to the egg. So when you see them, what we have been calling is fluffling the egg, and really kind of getting in there and like rocking back and forth and trying to get as much, kind of get the egg as deep into their feathers as possible. That's trying to maximize skin contact to the egg through the brood patch.
Egg and later.
And egg and chicks, yeah.
And then another question, maybe this one has been asked, but who monitors the camera 24/7? Is anyone watching all the footage?
We don't have anyone doing 24/7. We have probably 10 or 15 volunteers who are who have the camera controls, and so could be there's a number of people who are kind of checking in throughout the day.
Yeah, some people in different time zones and
we do
different work schedules.
Yeah.
So
we do rely on people who see something cool to let us know on social media so we can clip it. That's one of our best ways of kind of being alerted to something fun happening, because much as I would like to, I don't have the ability to watch the Falcons 24/7. So yeah, we do rely on quite a bit of word of mouth of something.
especially with
happening.
Alden hunting at night now.
Yeah, people have been really good about saying, oh yeah, like 2:33 a.m. he brought back a bird. It's like, oh well, I'm glad someone was awake for that.
All right, Kathleen asks, how many calories does Alden burn in a day with all his hunting? And I guess the same question would go to Annie as well.
Yeah, all right. So calculating out to calories, I don't know. I do know a typical adult peregrine falcon needs to eat about a medium-sized bird a day. And when I say medium-sized, I'm talking, like robin size. And a robin weighs about 75 grams. Notably, a pigeon is like 350. So one pigeon can last you several days. So I guess the question would be, I don't know, how many calories
Are in the 75 grams of robin?
are in a robin?
I have no
And
idea.
that's I suppose approximately how much they're
Yeah, what's the like
eating through a day.
chicken wing equivalent to a robin?
Yeah, I don't know. I got some Googling about how much chicken wing weighs and
How many calories are in a chicken wing? You
Yeah.
could probably figure this out. But
yeah. It is worth noting, peregrine falcons, people are envisioning, they're falcons, so they're very large, but they do only weigh like 1.5 pounds max. And so it's not a lot of animal that's being fed, although it is a very metabolically active and extremely fast animal. It's not as big of a thing as I think a lot of people have sort of in their head.
All right, Gail asks, who is your photoshopper? Who does the photoshopping? All right.
We haven't been doing as much
No,
Photoshopping
no,
this year. There's been too much other stuff.
yeah, there's been so much so much drama that we haven't been able to do any of the fun photoshops this year. We kind of the timing of Grinnell's death was such that our planned Photoshop never made it to
Yeah.
fruition because he
We
died
had
the day before
We
April
had
Fool's.
an April Fool's planned out that could never be.
And you know, you can't you could never announce a Falcons death and then have a Photoshop the next day being like, isn't this fun? Because it was pretty tragic.
Yeah. All right, as we're waiting for more questions, I'd like to mention that this Saturday we'll be doing another event with Sean and Lynn. And as with our children's department, this is a family event. It's on Saturday, May 21st, 3:30 p.m. to 4:15 p.m. And Emma, would you like to talk a little bit about the event?
Sure. So it's a family program, and Lynn and Sean have offered to talk about how to observe wildlife and falcons, for example, with and without binoculars. And it's also coinciding with the launch of the binoculars that Cal Falcons has donated to Berkeley Public Library. And so we will start circulating binoculars starting Saturday. We'll have them, you can place holds on them starting Saturday. And if you go to our, on that day, if you go to our catalog, which is berkeleypubliclibrary.org, you can type in binoculars and you'll be able to get in the queue to borrow them. And you can send them around to different locations, but need to have a Berkeley Public Library library card to do so. So Lynn and Sean, who are responsible for us having these wonderful resources available to everybody here in Berkeley, are going to be talking about how to use them and also what you can do, how you can see wildlife in your community without using fancy things like binoculars. So that's at 3:30. You can sign up on our website and get an Eventbrite ticket, which really is just a Zoom link. And I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. So, oh, and we also will be having American Sign Language interpretation of the program, which we're very pleased to be able to offer as well. And that's thank you to the Friends of the Berkeley Public Library that we're able to do so. So let me put that in the chat right now.
All right. And another question has come in. Please settle a bet. Was the male falcon Annie was entertaining while Grinnell was at Lindsay Hospital recuperating? Was it Alden or a different male?
It was a different male. We're really fairly certain about this. We kind of, Lynn and I were like poring over the
We've
pictures.
carefully gone through pictures and footage. They are distinctly different individuals. The one that Annie was briefly courting was much darker.
Yeah, we actually have a picture of him way back at the beginning. I'll see if I can pull it up. But it is a different bird. So it is not Alden who was showing up in October.
So just lots of
here it
people
is.
are.
So in the bottom left falcon here is the male that was there in October. So it had a very, very dark cap.
It goes like almost all the way down to the neck.
Yeah. So it's fairly clearly a different bird.
All right. And another question. How long have you been studying falcons?
So as an ornithologist, my study questions have been all over on birds, but falcons are one of the very first birds I really got interested in. And I did volunteer when I lived in Minnesota as a teenager to help monitor nests. Peregrine falcons in Minneapolis, and I also volunteered with the Minnesota Raptor Rehabilitation Center as a teenager. So, you know, like 20 years.
And Honestly, I have not done any work with falcons prior to the Annie and Grinnell moving into the Campanile. Pretty much all of my research work has been on small songbirds, warblers, and then my PhD work at Berkeley was studying wetland birds in the Sierra Nevada foothills. So I have kind of been learning as I go with picking up stuff from Lynn and our other experts on peregrine falcon biology. But yeah, that's kind of how long I've been doing it.
Great.
We have a question about transmitters. With transmitters getting smaller, do you anticipate trying to track the falcons?
So we're kind of coming up with plans for this.
We're in talks for this.
There's one big wrinkle is that no matter how small a transmitter is, when you can access a juvenile bird,
Yeah.
their
So,
body is not fully grown.
yeah. So we'll do a little backup. So there have been studies putting transmitters on adult peregrine falcons and tracking them during migration. But what we're interested is finding out what juvenile birds do when they're dispersing around the Bay Area, because we have a population of birds that's not very migratory, but we have a population that after they leave the nest, people really don't know in general, how far ranging falcons are. So we're interested in the question of what juvenile birds are doing, but that means the transmitter would need to be applied at just the kind of the right time.
So there's a few logistical issues that we need to kind of talk about amongst ourselves and with other researchers about how one could put transmitters onto juvenile birds. And it just has to do with the time that you go up to access a nest for banding is when the chick's legs are fully grown, but the rest of their body isn't, so that they're not running around like crazy and trying to escape the bander, and it's a much safer situation. But that doesn't fit very well with trying to put a harness with a transmitter on the bird, because they're just be too small to kind of have it fit correctly. So something we would love to do and want to do. We're still kind of trying to figure out the logistics of doing it.
Great. We have a request. Can you get a YouTube upload of Alden's Zen loafing on the balcony from Sunday night?
We'll try to find that one. Sunday night.
Did we miss a Zen loaf moment?
We might have missed the Zen
We
loaf.
might have missed some Zen loaf.
Well, hopefully he'll Zen loaf some more. That might have been when he was doing his little cross legs.
Oh yeah, we did
Yeah.
do that. We have stills.
Yeah.
Did we not get video?
Sure.
Okay. Well,
Well, I'll have to look.
the video doesn't permanently archive on its own, so once 12 hours is up and it hasn't been clipped, it's gone.
We have a question. Ian Young asks, can you give us some resources to learn more about falcons? Do you have any suggestions or books you think we should have at the library? Or
I mean, I feel like to start with, I'm just going back to like me in childhood. For a kid's book, when I was little, I read My Side of the Mountain and Frightful's Mountain, which were very influential to me and kind of gave me my first background about peregrine falcons. As far as books more geared towards adults, I feel like I'm doing that thing where there's so many that I can't think of a specific one to provide.
Yeah, we might have to email
we can
Emma and like put
we can
together
make like a reading list.
But yeah, because I'm blanking too. It was worse than my qualifying exam.
That is all right. All right. And as we're waiting to see if there's any last questions, I just wanted to mention that we have an additional bird event happening next week on May 24th at 11 a.m. Tuesday. over Zoom, and also broadcasting on site in our commons on the first floor. We have a event titled Brilliant Birds and Their Brains, and doctors Diana Lau and Melissa Johnston are two behavioral neuroscientists who work in a crow lab in Tübingen, Germany. So they will be calling in from Germany, and they will be talking about avian intelligence and intelligence in birds. And so that event will be happening next Tuesday. You can go to our website to sign up, and I can drop the link in the chat. All right. Let's see.
All right, and we made it in under the 11:15. We're a couple time zones over.
All right.
Yes, the slow loaf. We might have just clipped we might have just taken the stills.
All right, so looks like, sorry, my throat's a little dry there. Thank you so much for running this event.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah,
It's
this has
great.
been really fun.
And thank you for a super interactive audience there too. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. This video will live at the Berkeley Public Library YouTube site. We also will pass it on to the Falcons folks. Yeah, thank you. All right, so yeah, please check out the library for other Falcon events. And thank you again, Sean and Lynn. And check out
Thank you, guys.
binoculars. All
Yeah.
right. We'll see you on
Bye.
Saturday. Bye.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you,
thank
Sean
you,
and Lynn.
Randy.
See you Saturday.
Bye.